Hi everyone, welcome to another top 10 list, and this is another Patreon request, top 10 tiny games. So what does tiny mean? Well, I like a lot of small box games. You can see on my shelf there's quite a few little small games, particularly the Cosmos 2-player line. I like games that come in a small package if they can pack a lot of game in there. Now naturally, the smaller the box, the less game you can physically have in there without making it too weird of a gimmick. But I do love it when a small game gives me a decent amount of entertainment value for such a small price point, for such a small amount of storage space. I can pretty much just squeeze it into whatever little crevice I can find in my shelves. It's great when one of those comes around. So that's why I've got my favourite coat on right now, because I'm talking about games that I could fit essentially in my pocket. So you could call this top 10 pocket-sized games if need be. Now, pockets, okay, that's subjective, but my pockets are not ridiculously huge for a coat, and you can get a reasonable amount in there. There you go, one game pulled out. Not on my list, herbalism there, but that fits in my inside pocket. So we're basically talking this kind of size or smaller, although that does eradicate some sizes off the list. For examples, you won't see Abyss Conspiracy on this list, because if you try to get this in my coat pocket, it will go in, but I guarantee you, you won't look dignified trying to get it out again. So square tins do not work, which means Timeline can't make the list either. What I've just shown you there with the herbalism box is about as big as you can get. Ideally, it needs to be smaller than that. And because we are now entering the summer months in the UK, we don't have air conditioning and it's about 20 plus degrees today, this will be the end of this coat gimmick, and I'm going to take it off right now. But my number 10 is a very small flip and write game. Now, granted, I'm not a big fan of the roll and write genre. I'm kind of done with it, and I wish it would, well, to be honest, I wish it would kind of die a slow and painful death right now. Oh, come on! Because we're just seeing roll and write versions of everything, and it's starting to get ridiculous. There's a few that I put my stock behind, and sadly, my favourite one is too big to fit in my pocket. But this one, on the other hand, silver and gold, believe it or not, will fit in my pocket. It looks too long, but the width and the depth being really small means that this will slide into my coat pocket, and I can still carry this around. Silver and gold, the reason it's got a rubber band is just to keep the lid on in transport, because it's not the tightest of lids. But this is a flip and write game where you are flipping over cards and drawing on these little map cards in order to fill up the spots. It's a bit like what a polyomino game would do, except you don't have tiles, you're just simply looking at the shape on the card and filling it in. A bit like what cartographers did in that fact. But the cool thing with this is that they're dry erase cards. Okay, that's something a bit different. So you write on the cards, you cross off the squares, and some give you coins for points, some give you palm trees and that. But once you're done with the game, you essentially just wipe off the cards. Nice and neat, and no smudging, no dark, no dark patches or anything like that. It's fairly well produced for a light filler game. It takes about a quarter of an hour, 20 minutes to play through a 4-player game of this. I can teach it in about 60 seconds. It's that easy. It's a nice little neat game by Phil Walker Harding. It was hard to get hold of. I think you can probably find it a bit easier now, especially in the UK. But honestly, if you're a fan of the roll and write genre, give this one a go, because my family has really latched onto this quite well. I mean, it's not my favourite game ever, and I've mainly got a copy just so that I can teach it to new players. I keep a few games like that, but they instantly got me to buy them each a copy. So my parents have a copy, and so does my brother up north. He has a copy. So they were very keen to get this once I showed them it, and honestly, if you like the genre, you'll like it too. Silver and gold. Now my number 9 is not in my collection, but that's no bad thing on the game. It's just I've kind of burnt out on it, and I can play it at any cafe I go to because I know that both my local cafes have this game, and that is Hanabi. Hanabi was one of those tiny games that I actually managed to get one of my ex-girlfriends to play. She was never into, well, one of my exes anyway. None of my exes were ever into games. This is the problem I'm having right now.
Oh, my heart bleeds!
But one in particular was very much not into games, but there was one game that she liked, which was Hanabi. We played it as a 2-player game on camping trips, so it was easy enough to transport. It easily fits in your pocket. It's a nice tiny little box. Of course, I'm not talking about the deluxe one with the tiles. I'm talking about the card game version. But it's a neat little co-op where you have your cards facing away from you, which is certainly a bit different than usual. And then with what you're doing with the other players is you're giving each other clues as about what's in their hand, numbers from 1 to 5 in different colours. You have to lay your your cards out in a row from ones, starting at ones and going up to fives. There's less of the higher numbers than there are the lower numbers, but you can't communicate to each other than these clues. So you have to be able to balance giving each other clues. You've only got a finite amount of them unless you discard cards to get them back, but also being wary of, oh, hang on, that person's got a 5. I better tell them they've got a 5. All right, well, I don't know what I'm doing. I've got to discard a card. You told me these were important though, so I'm going to discard this one. And through very useful teamwork and a means of non-communication, you basically try and see how well you can do. As I said, one of my ex-girlfriends loved this game. We played it a lot as a 2-player, and to be honest, that's got to say a lot for it. You know, the person in my life who I remember being absolutely against games, liking this one though, it really must have sung to her. But in general, it's a really good fun co-op. It works anywhere from 2 to 5 players. It scales well. It was a Spiel des Jahres winner, Antoine Balzer. It's nice and neat. You can get the deluxe version if you want to have one for the home, but if you need something to take away with you, like for example, as I said, on a camping trip, Hanabi will suit you well as my number 9. My number 8 could probably use a rubber band around it as well, because if anything, this has got a weaker lid than the other one, and that is No Thanks. No Thanks, simple. I mean, look at it. This is one of the first games I had in my collection. Like back when I was in my flat and I had a full collect shelf with about 8 games on it. You know, I was just starting off. No Thanks, I think, was one of them. I picked it up for like a $5 or something, and it has done well since as a cute little filler game. Very straightforward. You basically flip a card over and you just decide whether you want it or not. If you don't want it, you put a chip on it. Otherwise, you take the card, but you're trying to have the least amount of points in the game, so taking cards is bad. But if you can chain a row of numbers together, so 35, 34, 33 for example, you'll only score the 33 and the 34 and the 35 get ignored. So it's a kind of like a pressure luck game where you only have so many of those chips to say no thanks, but you can get more from other players. There's a little bit of like, ooh, you know, a little, well, it's still pressure luck where you'll put chips on a card knowing that you're going to want the card because it's not going to mean any less points for you, but you're kind of guessing how many chips the other players are likely to put on the card before they take it off you. So there's a little bit of pressure luck there, a little bit of pressure luck on how many chips you've got, whether some cards are even in the deck because you don't use all of them in a game, so it's like I'm hunting for the 16. The 16 might not even exist, and that could be a bad thing. But it's cute. I can teach it again in a couple of minutes. It is dirt tiny little box. Like I say, it probably needs a rubber band on it just to make certain that the lid doesn't come off and all the chips don't go anywhere. But it's really cool. Very nice little Z-Man game. Cute filler. It goes from 3 to 5 players. No thanks. For my number 7, I don't own these either, but this is mainly because of my problem that I can't get 2-player only games to the table that much. Otherwise, I would probably get a couple of these myself. And that is the Magic the Gathering dual decks. And I mean specifically the dual decks. You know, if you get into the game as a proper thing, then yes, you could probably make a deck and take it with you. But if you're just talking about a casual gamer, the dual decks are fantastic. You buy them in packs of 2. They're different creature types, but they're basically poised to set against each other. They're designed that way. So for example, you might get a couple of dual decks, one with elves and one with goblins. They both function very differently. They'll both be different colors, so like the elves use forest mana and the goblins use mountain mana, but they go against each other and they're balanced against each other. These are great because even though the box packaging is a little bit big, once you take them out and you've got the deck, it's pretty small and it will easily go in your pocket, whether you just put a rubber band around it or stick it in a little container. But this is great to take with you because each person takes a dual deck and then you've got a decent amount of game in just those Magic the Gathering cards. And it's a great game. Magic the Gathering is a great game. I can't stress that enough. You know, I may not play it anymore, but I definitely played it quite for a few years when I was at university and met some colourful characters, let's say. I mean, this is one of the reasons I don't like going to tournaments anymore. You know, Magic the Gathering tournament players, whoo, they are a different breed.
I must break you.
But this is still a good fun game, and if I could play it more often, I would get some of these dual decks. There's a lot of them out there. Some are easier to get hold of than others, but you should be able to find a pair at some point. And if you want to test the waters of Magic the Gathering, these dual decks are a great way of doing it because you can basically just buy the deck, try it, see if Magic the Gathering's for you, and then at that point decide if you want to collect more cards. But honestly, I'd be happy just grabbing a few of the dual decks and saying, you know, I'm good. You don't want to get too suckered into a CCG craze, not if you want to value your wallet anyway. So my number 7, Magic the Gathering dual decks. Now my number 6, I don't own either. Like I say, don't hold that too much, guys, alright? It's 2-player only games are a problem for me, you know this, and I can only fit so many games in my collection. But this is an abstract game, it's really cool, and I suppose before I say it, one caveat with this list is that it has to fit in my pocket with the packaging and components that come with it. So this one you might think is a bit contentious at first, and that's Hive Pocket. Now, Hive is a really cool little abstract game, trying to surround your opponent's bee. It's got a very chess-like feel to it, but you're using these different like bait-like tiles with like a grasshopper and a fly and a spider on them, and they move in different ways, and it's very much like maneuvering the tiles to surround your opponent's bee. Really neat little game. Again, 2-player only, so I couldn't get it to the table very much, which is the only reason I don't own it, because I think it's a really good abstract game. But Hive Pocket, yes, you look at the packaging and it's like, hang on a minute, there's no way that'll fit in your pocket. Well, yeah, the packaging's dumb, alright? There's packaging on there where you have like 6 tiles showing in the plastic or something. I mean, that's stupid. I don't know who came up with that idea, but that was dumb. But inside the box, you have a felt bag. And in that bag, you just put all the tiles, and in Hive Pocket, there's smaller tiles, and you can get that bag in your pocket easily. I mean, it's called Hive Pocket. The clue's in the title, guys. Come on. But with it, you'll have a very cool little abstract game. You'll need a flat surface, ideally, to play it on, but to be fair, that's kind of true for a lot of these games, you know. I mean, where else are you playing these games? You're not playing them on the top of a mountain volcano, are you? But with this one, very nice. It will scratch that little chess feel for you, because I know I have games like Onitama, for example, to do that, but they're bigger games. I'm talking about travel pocket size. Hive will set you nicely, and it just looks really nice. I mean, yes, okay, the Hive Carbon version, the big black and white set, is clearly the best looking out of the lot, but the Hive Pocket one is still pretty nice. It even adds a little bit more colour for your liking. So, number 6, Hive Pocket. Now, before we get onto the top half of my list, please consider leaving a thumbs up, a like on the video. It's a millisecond of your time, and it really shows me how much people are appreciating the content. Also, don't forget that this channel is sponsored by Zatu.co.uk, a website that sells board games. If anything on this list is taking your fancy, consider using my code in the description for 5% discount off your entire basket of games. Pop on the website and see if you can save yourself a few quid while enjoying some great games. Now, on to the top half of the list. Now, I think people would have burned me at the stake if they didn't see this game on there. I mean, this is like the quintessential micro game. It started in 2013. It's now getting to the point where people are kind of sick and tired of seeing iterations of it pop up everywhere, and that is Love Letter. But specifically, I'm referring to this Love Letter. I do own the normal Love Letter in my collection. I still really enjoy it. It's a cool micro game. But this is the one I'm keeping as well, because I think this is the best of the line. Marvel Love Letter Infinity Gauntlet, I think is the full title, something like that. The idea with this is, yes, it's Love Letter, but it introduces a bit more theme in an all versus one style of play. One player plays Thanos, the other players play the Marvel heroes. And Thanos, as you would expect from the movies, is collecting all the Infinity Stones. But the way it works is that Thanos has more cards in his hand and has some very powerful cards with the Infinity Stones and some of the minions. And the superheroes have more standard Love Letter style cards, but with a few tweaks. And the idea is that the heroes have to work together to deduce what Thanos has in his hand, what cards to snipe out, how to slow him down by sniping out the Infinity Stones, while all at the same time staying alive, because Thanos is obviously trying to beat them down at a moment's notice whenever they can. You've got life totals for each side, and whichever one ends up at 0 loses, and that side wins. My only slight negative with the game is that the player scaling does upset the difficulty curve quite a bit. You know, if you've got less players in the game, then Thanos tends to wipe the floor with you, but then if you've got a lot of players in the game, then Thanos tends to struggle against that many heroes. But as I say, it's a light little micro game filler, so what does it really matter in that sense? But it's just a more interesting way to play Love Letter. A lot of different cards, the teamwork on the hero side is enjoyable to do, but then I like playing Thanos and being that one guy with all the like free cards in my hand, all the Infinity Stones, like beating down on all the heroes. But it leads to some very tense games. It can sometimes lead to a whitewash as well, but as I say, it's a micro game in a tiny little package with some half decent components as well. This is definitely my pick of the Love Letter series. I mean, at the end of the day, if this one doesn't take your fancy, then just substitute it with normal Love Letter and pick up pretty much any iteration you can find. The original, the Batman one, which was kind of weird. There was a Lord of the Rings one, I think there was like an Adventure Time one. You name it, there's a Love Letter for it. But this is definitely my pick. Marvel Infinity Gauntlet. Now my number 4 comes in 2 iterations, and no, this is not cheating, it just came in 2 different forms. Either one doesn't really matter, to be honest, but my one is the royal version, cockroach poker, or kakerlaken poker as it's said by the Germans. And this is one of my favourite little filler bluffing games. It's a very straightforward concept. You've got a bunch of cards with different vermin on them, like bats and spiders and toads, that kind of thing, and you have a hand of them, secret from the opponent, you pass one to an opponent face down and make a claim about it. This is a spider, and with the opponent then has a choice, one of 3, to say you're telling the truth, to say you're lying, or to look at it and pass it to another player and make their own claim about it, which could copy yours or it could be completely different. But this creates such laugh out loud moments from the bluffing side, as you're trying to suss whether somebody's lying to you, but then you're not entirely sure, so you decide to look at the card, and then you pass it to someone else, and you might say a completely different claim to the other one while trash talking the other player. It's like someone passes me a stink bug and I look at it and go, this guy's such a liar. This is actually a spider. And because there's no winner in this, there's only a loser, it kind of just puts people more at ease. The idea being that if you have 4 or more of a particular bug in front of you, you automatically lose and then the game ends. That's it, there's no winner. So everybody looks at other players' piles and sees, you've got 2 of a kind there, or you've got 3 of a kind there. And then suddenly, when somebody has got like 3 bats in front of them, suddenly bats are turning up on their doorstep on a regular basis, whether it's a lie or not. You know, it creates such good moments. Very nice little filler game. This one is beat up like old get out, as you can see. I mean, wow, this is really being taken some knocks here and there, but that's because I've taken it to club nights on a regular basis and I have such fun with it. Now, granted, I know 1 or 2 people who think it's one of the worst games they've ever played. I mean, okay, there's a luck factor to it and you only have so much information to go on, but for a light little fluffy filler game, this one just always gets me in laughs. The only difference between the royal and the normal version is essentially that the normal version had spiders as a suit, whereas this one doesn't have spiders. To me, that's kind of a plus point as it is, but it replaces it with a royal for each set, and basically the royals have a little penalty pile, and if you get caught with a royal, then you also take 1 off the penalty pile. So it's just basically a change up in the rules, and there's a couple of special cards in here, but honestly, I don't often use them because it's an extra thing to teach. You could pretty much just get whichever version of cockroach poker you like, but honestly, if you like bluffing games, this is a must-have in your collection. My number 3 is in my collection, but not in a form that would allow me to take it away on holiday. Well, actually, tell a lie, there might be the box in the box, but yeah, Star Realms. Star Realms, the really cool entry-level deck building game. Now, yes, okay, I can't take that thing in my pocket, guys, alright, I'm aware of this.
What the hell's in this thing? What's this? I said take only what you need to survive.
But Star Realms, like 2 sets of it, Colony Wars and the original, came in literally a tiny little deck box, like no bigger than, say, actually no, that's not a good example, but you know what I mean. A standard deck size box easily fits in your pocket. Now, with that, you can easily have 2 of you play the game. In fact, if you bought several of the sets, you could probably combine it and make 3 or 4 player games with it. But, as long as one person bought a deck each. But there's a lot of game in that box, You've got enough cards for a decent amount of variety with the 4 different factions. It's deck building at one of its most simplest. In fact, this is like alongside Dominion as the entry-level deck builder to teach people the mechanic. But it's just so small and so dirt cheap. Yes, you can go nuts and buy a big box from the Kickstarter or whatever and have a ton of cards. There's like mini expansions galore and things like that. But if you just literally want to get the bare bones of Star Realms, dip your toes in, or if you just want something to travel, then just grab one of those 2 boxes I mentioned. I think just Star Realms or Colony Wars, I think, were the 2 basic ones. And they will give you all the cards you need. In fact, if 2 of you are going away on a holiday, one of you brings 1 set, the other one brings Colony Wars, and then you've got even more cards and variety to use. It's just such a good amount of deck building goodness in a tiny box. It really is. It's such a cool game. It's got beautiful space artwork. I'm a massive fan of space artwork, but it really does the job. And like I say, if you like deck building, you definitely want to get into it, although not the highest deck builder you'll see on this list. Now that box I showed you in the example earlier with my coat was Herbalism. Now Herbalism is not on this list, but another game from Empress 4 is, and as I showed you, that box can just about fit in the pocket. It's kind of like the biggest size ever for a tiny game. But my favourite Empress 4 game is, without a shadow of a doubt, Hanami Koji. Hold it the right way up, you moron. Yep, this is such a cool game. I mean, you thought, well, the games were beat. You know, I don't know if the camera will focus on this. Let's see if it can. But if you can see the scuff marks on this thing has been used. It has been, like, battered. It's been taken to Dice Portsmouth events for teaching. But even then, I love this game. I love teaching it. I love showing people this new way of playing that they've never seen before. And, oh, love it. Such a good two-player game. This is my favourite Empress 4 game without a shadow of a doubt. You can buy Jixia Academy as well, which is basically a different theme, but it's the exact same game. The idea is that you are trying to influence a row of geisha characters, and these geisha are worth different points. They each have a certain amount of cards based on the items they use. Teapot, fans, you know, basically how geishas work. But the cool thing with this is you have 4 actions that each player can do and a hand of cards, but the 4 actions you can do in any order. They're things like, you know, take 2 cards out of the running, or I pick, you choose, like I'll pick 3 cards, offer them to you, you pick one, I get the other 2, that kind of thing. And they're very basic actions, but as the rounds go forward, you start getting more information about what the opponent might be holding or what they're gunning for. When they offer you 3 cards, are they trying to goad you into picking a particular card? And the idea is that the majority of cards on each side of those geisha rows influences that geisha. So you check it and see if anybody's got 4 or more of them, or 11 points worth, and if not, you rinse repeat for another round, but the geisha influence markers stay where they are. So in future rounds, you think, well, it's going to be hard for me to win that one back because I can't tie, because if I tie, you still own it. But then if I can keep hold of these and just get one more high value geisha, I can win. And so it just creates such a good amount of weird, tense decisions. And that concept of just 4 simple actions, but if you do the action early, you have all the choice in the world with the cards in your hand, but then you don't have much information about what's on the board yet. But then if you wait until later, you have a lot more information, but then you don't have a lot of choice with the cards in your hand. There's no right or wrong way to do it. I mean, obviously you got to think, like, pressure luck a bit, there's a little bit of tactics involved, but there's no like, oh, you must start off with this particular action first. You can't game the system that way. It's just so good. The artwork is beautiful. As I say, there's a reason this has a ton of scuff marks on it. I have taught this to a lot of people and they have just gone out and bought it straight away after I've done it. Like I say, I think Empress 4 owe me royalties on a couple of their games here. But honestly, one of the Dice Portsmouth events, this is one that I love bringing on, because then couples come along and they're like, oh, we just need a simple card game, but you know, we want it a bit thinky as well. I show them this and they love it. Hanami Koji, fantastic. And as I say, this box is as big as it's going to get in my pocket. Hopefully it will fit in your coat pockets as well. As I say, you know, take this list with a pinch of salt, I guess. But honestly, if this fits in your pocket and there's 2 of you going, you can't go wrong with this. And for my number 1, now if you're going to call this a cheat, I understand, but I still think it's valid, because I think you can still find a few stores that have this game in stock, and you can probably find it on a second-hand sale if nothing else, so I'm sure you'll be able to find a copy in this format somewhere. Granted, AEG put out a premium set, which I have in the other room, but before that, and I think you can still find a copy of their previous format, the non-premium version of Valley of the Kings is about as good as you can get for bang for your buck. Small, tiny box. That's even humanly possible. This is one of my favorite deck builders in existence, and this, I kid you not, right? This small box here, this Valley of the Kings, right? This is Last Rites. This is the last expansion that it had. There was a base set, there was, I forget what the second one was called, and then there was a third. There was basically 2 expansions in the base set. All of them fit in this box. Unsleeved, it all fits in this box. I am not joking. All you have to do is chuck away the excess starter cards, which, fair enough, you don't need any excess starter cards. You can just keep what's in there, but unsleeved, it fits. There's a tiny amount of box lift, but barely anything. I mean, I don't even need to rubber band this one, but wow. Love this deck builder. It takes those core concepts of, right, you can use cards to buy stuff, like in Dominion. They all have card abilities, like in Dominion, but the twist here is that you don't score any points unless you get the cards in what's called your tomb. You're essentially collecting sets. They're in different colors, and these cards all have different abilities, and the sets will be key towards maybe like making people discard their hands or shenanigans one way or the other. But the idea is that you have to do what's called an entomb action to get it out of your deck into your tomb, and then it will score points based on how many in the set. But once you put it in your tomb, you don't get it back. So you have to decide, well, hang on a minute, I'm really liking this high value card here with this cool ability, but then if I take it out of my tomb, if I put it in my tomb, then I don't have that cool ability anymore. When do I start doing that? It uses a little cool pyramid system where you buy from the bottom and the cards slide down the pyramid and refill at the top, so it's quite a neat way of showing essentially a market per se. But the abilities and the cards are really varied, and with 2 expansions for this game, you can get a lot of different combinations for sets, creating some very different styles of play. Now, my one sort of caveat is that I don't recommend you play this with 4 players. I think it just goes on a bit too long with 4 players, but 2 or 3 player, this is a fantastic deck builder. I love Valley of the Kings. It's up there as one of my favorite deck builders. I don't know if it's my all-time favorite. It does fight Dale of Merchants a bit on that one, but I do really love this game. And as I say, if you can find it in this box, then definitely consider it, because for a travel pocket-sized game, this is great. I mean, as I say, this has 2 expansions in it. Just buy 1 box on its own and you'll be perfectly fine. I recommend Last Rites. It's the best of the lot. It has the best starter cards in the set. But honestly, if you can pick up any of the others, then by all means do so. You know, pick up whichever one you can find on the secondhand market. It's probably cheap enough. You might even be able to get it from AEG if you're lucky. But as I say, if people think this is a cheat, fair enough. But honestly, I think that there's got to be some ways that you can get hold of the small box of this. Valley of the Kings, my number 1. Now, before I tackle the People's Choice, I just want to give a small honourable mention to Lady and the Tiger. This is a really cool system where these really gorgeous looking cards that look like they're gold embossed in places. Basically, it's a 5-game system. So with this simple deck of cards, you can play 5 different games here. It almost made my top 10, but the games in here, including a solo game, a couple of 2 players, and 2 to 4 and a 2 to 6, they're decent, but they're not stellar. You know, none of them are bad, but none of them are great either. So it's kind of not enough to make my top 10, but honestly, if you're looking for a tiny game that packs a lot of different games in a small box, this is definitely one you want to give a look. So now, the People's Choice. Like I say, I put up a poll on the board game group in advance of the list and after I've already done my own list to see what the various people who play games like to put in their version of the top 10. This allows me to talk about games that I otherwise didn't mention, or comment on why some games I didn't put on the list because of various caveats or restrictions. And I've got an interesting set of 10 here, a couple that I feel might have broken the rules a little bit, but as I say, this is what the people are saying, so we'll see how much I agree with them and how much I don't. So number 10 is Oh My Goods. This is the Alexander Pfister game. I like it. It's fine. It's not brilliant for me. It's a simple little engine builder, but it definitely fits the pro forma of this list of being a very tiny game with a decent amount of thinkiness and game in there. It's certainly a damn sight better than that Expedition to New Dale, which is basically the exact same game, but make it like 10 times bigger, 2 hours long, and even more luck than the card game. It's like, seriously, why did we ask for that? Yeah, but the Oh My Goods little card game is neat and certainly works. Then number 9 was Sprawlopolis. Now, I have not played Sprawlopolis other than multiplayer, and I've only played it I think once, maybe twice, so I don't really know enough about the game to say whether I like it or not, but I hear that people play this predominantly for solo mode, which is fair enough, and to be fair, it's small, it's a little card city building game, and I hear it's great in solo mode. I've just not really had a chance to try it in that mode, and I just don't feel like forking out the cash for it right now. But it was popular enough to hit the top 10 of this list, so clearly the people know best on that one. Number 8 is Hive, although they just put Hive, and somebody put Hive Pocket a bit further down. I'm going to assume that by Hive you mean Hive Pocket, because none of the other Hive games will fit in your pocket, period. Here, there's a reason, as I said, it's called Hive Pocket. So they agree with me on that, providing they weren't thinking that they could fit that big black and white carbon bag in your pocket, because that's not happening. Number 7, Hanabi. As I say, people agree with me on that one. Number 6, not a fan of this game at all, and that is Coup. You know, small little social deduction game where you're using different character abilities to try and be the last man standing. I personally don't like the game. I mean, the Duke is the most powerful character in the set, so everybody just claims they're the Duke. It seems just mostly luck of the draw as to whether you can guess what someone is, and sometimes you can just be caught in an unwinnable position. Not a favourite of mine, but I don't know, it's popular with a few people, but I would not even put it anywhere near my top 10. It's certainly tiny though. This is a weird one for my number 5, Point Salad.
Right.
Okay, I like Point Salad, I have it in the other room, but that's not tiny. That is a small box game. I mean, it's comparable in size to this. This is about as big as the Point Salad box is. That's way too big to get in your pocket. Now, they could be implying that if you took all the cards out and that was it, and you could put them in your pocket and just discard the box. That's all said and good, but I did put the caveat on my list that I was only using the components that came with the game to facilitate can it fit in my pocket or not. So no, I'm not like allowing the idea of taking everything out of a box, putting it in a baggie and sticking it in your pocket, because then I could mention a ton of games there that I could probably do that with. The Hive Pocket was different because it came with the felt bag. So that was a different story, otherwise it wouldn't have worked. But yeah, I was quite surprised to see that one get so many votes on there, unless they just forgot the definition of tiny.
Can you remind me what I pay you people for? Honestly, throw me a bone here.
Number 4, again, I really don't like this game. Deep Sea Adventure, although it's not a surprise to see this high on the People's Choice because a lot of people like this game. It's just a very simple push-your-luck game where you're diving down to pick up these tokens with points on them, take them back up to the submarine before you run out of oxygen. Every time I see this game being played though, it's just basically, first round, everyone dies, because everyone tries to go down deep. Second round, someone gets the clue, goes down, finds the first token they can, goes back to the submarine, and then everyone else tries to beat that person and everyone dies. And then in the third game, everybody tries to get further than the other person did, and then everyone dies. It's just, I don't know, it plays out occasionally differently from that, but honestly, I just don't particularly like this game. It's just roll a die, get lucky if you can. I find it boring, honestly. I don't feel much in the way of, like, fun, dramatic tension. I just pretty much pick up the first 1 or 2 tiles I can get and go back to the submarine, because you can go a long way down this S, but that's such a stupid thing to do because you just don't have anywhere near enough oxygen to go all the way down to the bottom and get all the way back up. It's like, it's pointless. So you just go for the early stuff. I don't know, it's tiny, it's popular, there's no surprise why it's on this list, and for those of you who are fans of it, then fair play to you, but yeah, not a fan myself. Number 3, Star Realms. People agree with me on that one. I kind of thought this would actually be number 1, but apparently not. Now, number 2, you might have been wondering why this didn't make my list, and I think the size is too much. The problem is I can't actually tell if it would fit in my pocket or not, and that is Sushi Go. Now, I've got Sushi Go Party. Clearly, that's not going to fit in my pocket, and that is the preferred way I like to play the game. Sushi Go comes in a fairly fat size tin, and I don't know if it would fit in my coat pocket. And unfortunately, I don't have a copy on me to test this theory out. So, you know, it used to come in a very small card box, and that would easily fit in my pocket, but the new packaging, I'm not entirely convinced. Now, if you do think it would fit, then where would it be on my list? It would be pretty high. It would definitely be in my top 5 if I deemed it would fit in my pocket, but as I say, I was a little bit uncertain as to whether it would fit, and I thought I would play it safe and talk about other games. And also, not to mention that, honestly, if I'm going to play Sushi Go, I would much rather play the party version with all the different variety. The Sushi Go, like, small box set is literally just one set menu and that's it, so the replay value is a little limited. And then finally, of course, everybody agreed with this one. This got the most votes, although, to be honest, the votes didn't get high in quantity until the top 3. So there was quite a gap between Deep Sea Adventure and Star Realms, and then these 3 were actually relatively close. But of course, Love Letter. Love Letter, the quintessential micro game. Yes, I mean, if this didn't make the top 10, I would have been very surprised. Pick up whatever iteration you like, or check out that Marvel one that I mentioned before. That's really cool. But yeah, the top 10 People's Choice for tiny games, and there you go. all the tiny games you could hope for. So, as I say, a small box would just be far too many games to pick from on that front. And I do like small box games, but when a very tiny game like takes my fancy, and granted, I don't own a ton of them because the thing with tiny games is that they are kind of hit and miss as to whether they're any good or not. Some games try to be tiny even though the game is clearly something that should be in a bigger box. Tiny epic. But, you know, most of the time you pick one up and you go, that's neat, but fine, I'll let it go. But when I do find something that comes in a tiny box, like I say, the Valley of the Kings was the perfect example, and Star Realms, which just, and Hanami Koji even, although let's say we ignore that for the purposes of size and go with those other two, when I find games like that and I'm just like, for this much? In a tiny little box? That's fantastic. I love it. You know, it's really, really cool. So that's it for me on this top 10 list. If you like what you see, then consider leaving a thumbs up or a like. It means the world to me to know that you appreciate the content and want to see it continue. Don't forget to check out the other content on the channel, such as my top 10 essential expansions that I did a couple of weeks ago to kick this series off, and also the recent live stream I did with Board Game Perspective, where we talk about 5 games we're expecting greatness from. Until next time, remember, it's only a game. Bye for now.